You have probably followed the Christian religion since you were little, and perhaps over the years, you have begun to have some difficulty thinking about the resurrection of Jesus. Or you follow another religion, or you are not a believer. But the fact of the resurrection has always intrigued you, and you would like to better understand the mystery it represents. Well, in this video, letting ourselves be helped by the doctrine of the three bodies of the Buddha, called Trikaya, we will clarify, once and for all, the resurrection of Jesus, speaking about it with extreme frankness and using, so to speak, the glasses of Buddhism, which will allow us to face things from another point of view in order to reveal the most authentic heart of the Christian faith. Questions about the resurrection of Jesus are the most diverse. Is it just the resuscitation of his corpse 3 days after having undergone the torture of the cross? If this actually happened, where did Jesus' body go? Was he taken up into heaven, as the evangelist Luke states? Why, in some gospel stories, is the resurrected Jesus not initially recognized? Mary Magdalene mistakes him for the guardian of the garden, and the disciples of Emmaus even make an entire journey with him without recognizing him. Finally, how can we explain the fact that even today, many have a real experience of the encounter with Jesus Christ to the point that their lives are completely transformed? Even within Buddhism, we wondered how Siddhartha Gautama, who later became the Buddha, could continue to assist others in achieving enlightenment even today. Precisely to answer this question, especially in the Mahayana context, the doctrine of the three bodies of the Buddha was developed. The three bodies, or kaya, represent different ways, at the same time complementary, in which Gautama the Buddha, or any other Buddha, operates and is present. The first body is the Nirmanakaya, or manifestation body, with which the Buddha was physically present among his contemporaries. The Nirmanakaya represents the real historically existed person. It is the physical form of the Buddha who appears in the world to teach and guide beings towards liberation. To draw a parallel with Christianity, the Nirmanakaya can be compared to the historical person of Jesus of Nazareth, to his concrete life, which began in Galilee and ended with the death sentence in Jerusalem. The second body is the essential Dharmakaya, or ultimate reality body. When Gautama achieved enlightenment under the Bodhi tree, he became one with the ultimate reality of Dharma, which represents the pure and conscious essence of the entire universe. In this regard, the phrase that Gautama Buddha addressed to his disciples is often quoted, and which resonates very similar to that of Jesus in the Gospel of John. Whoever sees me sees the Dharma. In the Gospel, the word Dharma is replaced by the word Father. Even in this case, a parallel can be ventured with Christianity, comparing the Dharmakaya to the moment of the Transfiguration. In this episode, Jesus reveals in his body the essence of the true man and the true God. In the presence of Peter, James, and John, he fully manifests himself as the Christ, the Son of God. If you want to delve deeper into the parallel between enlightenment and transfiguration, I'll leave you a video in the description where I talk about it. Just as meeting Gautama Buddha meant coming into contact with the Dharma, so meeting Jesus Christ meant coming into contact with God. The powerful reality of the essence of Dharma did not end with the death of Gautama Buddha. On the contrary, her disciples continued to perceive her as present and alive. Thus was born the concept of the third body, called Sambhogakaya, or body of fruition. It is the body through which the Buddha can still be enjoyed by his followers, the body with which he is still perceived as truly and effectively present among them. A body different from the one in flesh and blood represented by the Nirmanakaya, and which goes beyond that which embodies the ultimate reality, represented by the Dharmakaya. A spiritual body of the Buddha, purified, luminous, and omnipresent, which offers itself to all those who are ready to welcome it, to achieve enlightenment. If what you've heard so far has piqued your interest, let me know with a like. Now pay close attention to this step. Is it possible to venture a comparison between the third and last body of the Buddha with the body of the risen Jesus Christ? When we speak of the third body, or Sambhopakaya, we are expressly referring to a spiritual body, undoubtedly real, but certainly not in the flesh. When we talk about the resurrection of Jesus, however, it clearly says that the tomb was empty. His physical body was no longer there. Furthermore, in the Gospel of Luke, Jesus himself invites his disciples to look at the wounds due to the crucifixion and to touch him to see that he was not a ghost. As if that wasn't enough, he also eats a portion of roasted fish. Of course, this would not have been possible if it had only been a spiritual body. Now, for many Christians, believing that Jesus of Nazareth, known as the Christ, was bodily resurrected on the third day after dying on the cross, is enough to nourish a healthy and genuine faith. But it is also true that just as many Christians and non-Christians struggle to accept such an extraordinary event and at the same time ask themselves, is it possible that the resurrection of Jesus represents something much deeper than the simple miracle of a person who was dead and then came back to life? The answer is certainly yes. To fully understand the profound meaning of Jesus' resurrection, a small premise must be made. For the Jewish mentality of the time, a resurrection understood only and exclusively in a spiritual sense, or as a vision of a ghost, would not have been given credence and would not have been taken into consideration in the slightest. To the irrefutable fact of the corporal death of Jesus of Nazareth, it was necessary to oppose, or superimpose, another equally irrefutable fact. Only a return to life of the physical body of Jesus could overcome the trauma of death on the cross, and then become a living and real presence in the history of humanity. To give an example of the attitude of a Jew of the time, I would like to recall the episode of the Apostle Thomas in the Gospel of John, who refuses to believe in the risen Jesus without first having touched the marks of the nails and the wound of the cost. What I would like you to pay attention to now are the words that Jesus addresses to Thomas after having made him touch it with his hands.
Blessed are those who, despite not having seen, believe.
It is Jesus himself who, with these words of his, wants us to understand that authentic faith is not based on witnessing astonishing miracles. Therefore, even regarding his resurrection, there is something much more important than having seen and touched it. The authentic meaning of the bodily resurrection of Jesus lies in the fact that the risen Christ is present, in flesh and bones, in those who assimilate his own life, the life of that Jesus of Nazareth known as the Christ, who lived 2,000 years ago, whose actions and words we can still read in the Gospels today. As proof of what has been said, the episode of the Disciples of Emmaus, narrated in chapter 24 of the Gospel of Luke, is emblematic. Despite having walked next to the risen Jesus all day, they do not recognize him, except in the evening, after having listened to his words, sitting at the table, when he breaks the bread and shares it with them. In that gesture of sharing and familiarity, they finally recognize him, and at the same moment, Jesus disappears before their eyes because he is finally within them. In fact, full of joy, they return to Jerusalem and announce the good news. Whoever meets them will meet the risen Christ. The language that was fine in the Jewish world of 2,000 years ago, where, to restore vigor to the historical figure of Jesus, who died on the cross, one necessarily had to speak in realistic terms, and at the same time prodigious, of his bodily resurrection, it is probable that it no longer adapts to our times. Today's mentality probably gives more importance to the coherence between truth of faith and reason. In this sense, the Buddhist concept of the Sambhogakaya, the spiritual body through which the Buddha can be perceived as truly present by his followers, can help us better understand the experience lived by Jesus' disciples after his death. In fact, they met the risen Jesus in the daily routine of their lives, when they all gathered together to relive his story and to break and share bread. In those moments, they perceived a real presence of Jesus in their midst, spiritually tangible in their physical life. Therefore, even today, the risen Christ is truly present in our flesh when we assimilate his own life, his teachings. As St. Paul announces in the first letter to the Corinthians, in chapter 12,
Now you are the body of Christ.
Christianity gives great importance to the corporal dimension of the resurrection, precisely to say that the divine became man in history, and that there is no difference between the historical Jesus and the Christ of faith. Jesus of Nazareth fully embodied the Spirit of God, which made him the Christ, the Son of God, the risen one who still lives today in those who choose to follow his way. We're not talking about two different people, but about the same Jesus. This is the good news, the beating heart of the Christian message. We too can be Christ and enter eternity already here and now if we let him live in us, if we welcome his real living presence. As St. Paul states again in the letter to the Galatians,
I don't live anymore, but Christ lives in me.
Indeed, what makes a Christian a Christian? The fact that he believes in a reanimated corpse, or the fact that he himself embodies the risen Christ who lives in him and for him? If we talk about the bodily resurrection of Jesus only in miraculous terms, without broadening our gaze to the infinity that opens up in the face of this event, the risk is that of misrepresenting the Christian message. Sometimes it is easier to relegate Jesus to the highest heavens, ascended with his fleshly body, separated from us, far away, when instead he himself said,
Every time you did these things to one of my younger brothers, you did it to me.
Jesus himself, in fact, invited us to see his face, his person in all men, especially in the poorest and most marginalized. If this video has given you any food for thought, let me know in the comments, and remember to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. You will help us grow so we can offer you more content like this. I also invite you to watch this video that compares the transfiguration of Jesus with the enlightenment of Gautama Buddha. Namaste, and God bless you.